Today the instructions are on emotions, and it seems, although we decided this ages ago, it seems very timely that we're talking about emotions, since it came up a lot in the inquiry, and it is a massive area of exploration and investigation. And of course, it's the thing that probably is the most difficult aspect of navigating the heart-mind, to find equanimity and to open ourselves to what's already there, the all-encompassing space of the nature of mind, because when the emotions are there, it doesn't often seem very spacious unless they're joy, contentment, and happiness. So yes, it's very important that we recognize joy, contentment, and happiness. And we forget to do that. It's often when we only turn to the emotions is when they feel tricky and difficult. So how to navigate this tricky world of emotions? And many of us have very different relationships with the emotions. You know, for some of us, there's certain emotion that it's okay to let us feel. Like for some people, angry have got two emotions, angry and very angry. For some of us, we never let ourselves feel the anger. For some of us, we avoid all emotions and do a big disconnect, which therefore makes it, you know, if we're trying to get rid of a difficult emotion, the mind can't make the separation. If you're trying to get rid of one emotion, you get rid of all emotions. And that often means that you don't feel joy, happiness, and contentment. And that often it is a type of depression. There are many types of depression, but pressing down on the emotions can create one kind of depression. And sometimes people have a massive fear of being overwhelmed by or swamped by the emotions. And for some people whose emotional world can be more intense than others, it's just seesaw. It feels like seesawing through emotional turbulence. So there's many, many different relationships with emotions. But a skillful navigation with emotions is very important for our response, because they give us a response rather than reaction in life. So being able to notice your emotions and be able to interpret them into needs and concerns, that gives us a lot of information about taking skillful action rather than reactive action in life. So very important. And emotions are also, if we can get our conceptual mind out of the way, they are the source of our intuitive wisdom. They are our connection with others through limbic resonance and mirror neurons. And I'll say something about limbic resonance in a minute. And also opening us to our vulnerability. Our vulnerability, well, most people don't like vulnerability because the culture equates it with weakness. And, you know, we don't want to sense that we're weak, or that if we think if we let ourselves connect with our vulnerability, that others will take advantage of it. But we're not, actually we're much more empowered when we're connected to our vulnerability, because we're not putting up defenses to protect it. And those defenses anyway usually don't work. We actually, rather than keep out difficult things, we create a prison for ourselves. We put up big walls around ourselves. And it's rather a prison than a protection. And usually people won't get out of that prison until the prison becomes more unpleasant than what you think you're trying to protect yourself from. So we're not wanting to imprison ourselves in this way and limit and reduce ourselves. So our skillful connection with our emotions is, I think, very important. It's always been important, but it's so important at this time where everything about our lives has been so disrupted, and where we realize that our communities, our various communities that we're connected to, and our interpersonal, our one-on-one relationships, our family relationships, we're starting to see what actually is important with this massive disruption that we're facing globally in global economic and ecological and so on terms. So we realize that community is so important, and connection. So we want to be able to be skillful with our emotional world. And there's a marvelous book called A General Theory of Love. It's actually 20 years old, this book, but it's a brilliant piece of work. It's absolutely poetic and beautiful. And this is about when we when we're skillful with our emotions, it deepens our connection. And this is what it says. If a listener quiets his neocortical chatter, that's our thinking mind chatter, and allows limbic sensing, that's our emotional capacity, limbic sensing, to range free, melodies begin to penetrate the static of anonymity. As the listener's resonance grows, she will catch sight of what the other sees inside that personal world, and start to sense what it's like to live there. As the listener's resonance grows, she will catch sight of what the other sees inside that personal world, and start to sense what it feels like to live there. Limbic resonance is very different to having an idea about someone and relating to the idea of a person rather than the actual person. And that is so common in relationships. We relate to even someone who's living in the same house, we relate to the idea of them, not actually who they are. And that when we can get that neocortical chatter out of the way, those emotions are deeply, deeply intimate and connective. And that's, I think, what we're craving. Absolutely craving, because we're social people. And that's our sociability has temporarily been broken down by the pandemic, but it is long-term broken down by social media, which gives the illusion of connection, but it's hollow and empty. So this is incredible important practice at this time. So the bare feeling of Vedana. So in the four foundations of mindfulness, we have mindfulness of body, mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of mind states, mindfulness of dharmas. So dharmas are the teachings that are holding everything we do here. So mindfulness of Vedana. Vedana is the second foundation of mindfulness, is of the feeling tone. It's called feelings, but the feelings are pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. And that feeling tone is so fast and so quick that it's impossible actually to notice it when it's happening. And, you know, even sort of adept masters of meditation have said they cannot notice that flash of pleasant, unpleasant, and neither. They cannot notice that. So but what we have to, shortly after that, we start to notice it. So that's fine. We're not needing to notice it. Immediately it happens. But the bare feeling of Vedana is simply pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. Emotions are way more complex. The feelings of pleasant, unpleasant become emotions. So pleasant, unpleasant transforms into emotions when pleasant and unpleasant is intensified through perceptions, imagination, and memory. And that's where the neocortical effect comes. So you have an experience of pleasant, unpleasant, and then the mind just goes with its perceptions, with its conditioned perceptions, imaginations, mental proliferation and memory, because we also have stored emotional memory, which often is below awareness, which gets triggered on occasions, and then that memory is already intensified by forgotten perceptions, or sometimes you can remember them for either remembered or forgotten perceptions, imaginations, and memory. So this is an example of how it might work. You're walking down the street in spring and you smell jasmine. Now, some people hate the smell of jasmine. It's too strong, so that's unpleasant. Some people love it. It's pleasant. But smell can also trigger memory. So that smell triggers the memory of when your lover left you for a younger person 5 years ago. And suddenly the smell of jasmine is extremely unpleasant, and all that proliferated perception, memory, and so on is suddenly an emotion is happening, a massive emotion is happening in your body of hurt or anger or whatever, sadness, and so on. And then you've done some very good meditation investigation of that experience and that emotional response. And 20 years later, you're walking down the street in spring and you smell the jasmine and there is no response, no reaction. And any of you sitting here would know that all you would have to do is think about a person or an event. I don't do it now, but I would try not to do it now that I've suggested it. And you can evoke or think about, and don't do it, but we could think about an unpleasant event, and suddenly we're going to be filled with emotions. Isn't that right? Because out of memory, it's coming out of memory, and it's already been magnified by perceptions and imagination and so on. And then if we evoke it, we just keep magnifying it with perceptions and imaginations and memories and so on. So that's incredibly important to know, how we magnify unpleasant into emotions, because we can choose to not do that. That's something we can choose to not do. And we are supported in not doing that by mindfulness of body, because an emotion is a set of sensations, body sensations. As we explored yesterday, people described these sensations of emotion. And if we turn our attention to the bare sensation of that emotion, what it does is that it takes us away from that chatter, the mental chatter, that is going to magnify it. And then it can settle. And you can still have, as we saw yesterday in the inquiry, you can still have the sensation of the emotion, but be grounded and centered, because in a way, the emotion is an incredible ally towards grounding and centering. Because if we turn to the body and we can sit with the pulsing, the movement of the sensation, the butterflies, or the the huge range of sensations we can have, the tightness, the heaviness, and so on, the hot or the cold. When we move towards our body without trying to fix it or change it, we become grounded, because we're now inhabiting the body, not the thinking mind. So what is is also important, that we learn to turn towards it rather than away from it, because we've got huge numbers of ways of leaving the body. It's just a simple, dissociation is a very strong way, just completely leave the body. Some people dissociate. Most of us hold our breath in order not to feel, or we can get very overthinking, hugely obsessive in the thinking mind. That's a way not to feel the emotions, but sadly, it has the side effect of amplifying those emotions. Workaholism, never stopping, is a way not to feel the emotions. Adrenaline, so going, it's really good to go and do exercise, swim and run and so on, but we often do that to get away from emotions, don't we? So we push our body and we increase the adrenaline in our body, and that stops us feeling. And I fully know about that, because I did adrenalated activities almost for the whole, I lived on the edge for the whole of my life, pretty much, with extreme activities like war zones and motorbikes and camel races and all that sort of thing, in order not, I didn't realize what I was doing it in order not to feel. But adrenaline is a very good way of not feeling. So just even starting to notice when you might be even holding your breath right now, you just notice, let yourself, you're listening, you're concentrating. That often makes you hold your breath, but you're going to concentrate better actually if you're breathing. But letting the flow of life as you're sitting here listening. Just notice whether you actually are limiting your breathing right now. So what we are practicing here is to turn in the direction that helps. Turn towards ourselves when an emotion arises. But the culture has trained us to turn towards the event or the other. And when we turn towards the other person or the event, what we are generally trying to do is to manipulate them so that they or the event will behave in a way that I don't have to feel what I'm feeling. So the subtext of most struggles between people, the subtext is make me okay. And that is a fruitless chase, because we can't make each other okay when there's a struggle going on. Yes, when things are all fine and beautiful, we can, give empathy, support, help, etc. But in a struggle, we cannot make each other okay. And it only pulls us apart. And it's actually not the job of another adult to make us okay, although we tend to think it is. Our job is to be loving and kind and non-harming to each other. But it is not our job to make each other okay, because that is impossible. It's up to each one of us. And that's why we're sitting here exploring our own mind. So if perception, imagination, and memory magnify Vedana.
Carol, she's saying.
Sorry? Oh, if perception, imagination, and memory magnify feelings of pleasant and unpleasant into emotions, then what we need to do is to be able to differentiate thoughts, feelings, and emotions. We have a basic language problem that makes it difficult for us to do that, because we say we feel everything. We say, I feel unsupported. Unsupported is not an emotion. Unsupported is a thought about a situation. I'm not being seen, someone's not, helping with the household chores or with the kids, or at work, they're not pulling their weight in the team or whatever. That's the thought about all of that. Of course, there's going to be, if you're thinking that you're unsupported, then there's going to be emotions with it, because that thinking is ramping up the unpleasant nature into an emotion. So we need to pay attention to what emotion is there flowing under the thoughts of unsupported. And it might be fear, it might be hurt, it might be anger, and so on, but might be all of them. So that level of differentiation between a thought and an emotion is important, because we do use, and I'm not saying you have to change your language, you just have to start to notice the difference between thoughts and emotions. We might say, oh, I feel hassled, or I feel betrayed, or I feel abandoned. They're all thoughts, but their emotions go with it. So this is the process of differentiation. So what will help with that differentiation is to take a set of what's called the 8 basic emotions. So we've got afraid, angry, hurt, and sad, and they're the difficult ones. And we've got excited, passionate, happy, and contented. So it's important that we also notice the pleasant emotions, that we stay embodied as much as we can with the pleasant emotions, recognizing them, savoring them. And we also get to know hurt, afraid, angry, and sad. So we know those emotions are present because they have body sensations. And that's what we're trying to avoid, the body sensation of those emotions. That's what we're holding our breath against, working too hard, going for a huge, long, pushing our body to an extreme to bring on adrenaline, overthinking things, dissociating. We're trying to get away from those body sensations. So what we want to be able to do is start to reconnect with them, and to start to know, be able to identify which emotion those sensations are. which they are. So, you know, sadness is often a sort of heavy, a weighty feeling. But there are many different sensations for everyone. They're different. So you need to, what are the sensations for you that go with sadness? What are the sensations for you that go with fear? So I remember I had a horse that was so flighty that when I got onto it, it would also, you know, I never knew whether it would go into a pig rooting fit or not. So when I approached, I had enormous fear about getting onto that horse. So when I would approach that horse, my legs actually went to water. That is fear. And the other thing is that we often want to have a, you know, when we're afraid, we want to pee a lot, don't we? The number of times if you're afraid and you're going to do a big presentation, you have unnecessarily have to go and have a pee, that's fear. Other sensations of fear. Someone turn on their mic and let's hear a few of your telling me about what sensations go with fear. Anyone?
Butterflies in the stomach.
So Steph, yes, go on.
Hi Carol. Butterflies in the stomach, feeling.
Butterflies in the stomach, yes. Anything else?
Dry mouth.
Dry mouth, okay. There's some good ones. Thank you, Steph. Anyone else?
Heart pounding. So
heart pounding.
You hear it in your head.
Yes, that's right. Yep, heart pounding. Yes?
Sorry, tingling across the shoulders and up over the scalp.
All right. So you see how different all these sensations are. There's not a set that is each one of us have. And let's have one more and then we'll move on to anger. Anyone?
Electricity, yes? Electricity traveling up and down the spine.
Okay, electricity up and down the spine. All quite unpleasant sensations, I think. So no wonder we want to get away from them. That is so weird. People have said to me, well, why would I go towards something that was so difficult and unpleasant? I mean, that's human. That is why we have to look at Vedana, because Vedana conditions getting away from and unpleasant conditions getting away from and pleasant conditions going towards. Very simple. You know, they've done lots of experiments with animals, sadly, about operant conditioning, going towards the pleasant, getting away from the unpleasant. So of course we want to get away from it. It's deeply embedded in our very primitive part of our nervous system, our brain stem. Yeah. So we don't want to make it wrong or bad that we want to get away from it, but what we're doing is getting the courage together to go towards it, because it actually releases the contraction and the smallness that it forces us into when we're fighting something in ourselves, and we can open to that all-encompassing space of the nature of mind. We're not contracted down. All right, so afraid, my experience of hurt about to happen. Now, this is interesting because often we've ramped up all the fear and anxiety and it never happens, does it? How many people have ramped up huge amounts of fear and anxiety about something that never happens? Yes, all of us, yes. And so we also have to notice that it's not, that is why present moment practice is so powerful, because it's actually not happening in this very moment. It is not happening. Yeah. And we have to start seeing. I had an absolute epiphany in the dentist where I would be so fearful to the level of passing out. And then I realized that the hurt wasn't happening. It was just my fear of it about to happen. Changed my relationship with the dentist completely. So we have to watch that hurt about to happen. And we don't want to make all of these emotions are very adaptive and useful. So fear makes us cautious. Like if you approach a 4-lane highway, you have that feeling of fear, then it's going to make you look and really look very closely. Or what fear can do is make your response so fast that you can get yourself out, put your foot on the brake incredibly quickly if someone stops in front of you. That's what it's for. It's not to create stress and suffering for ourselves about something that's not happening or probably never going to happen. So we have to value these emotions because they are very adaptive to our survival, but we've taken them beyond that adaptive use and made them actually against our ease and well-being. All right, so anger. Now, anger is also, so we're not making any of them wrong and bad. What we don't want is to be dumping anger onto someone else. But anger, when it arises in you, is telling you that something is wrong. Something is wrong. It's like a boat in the ocean sends up a beacon. Something is wrong. So underneath anger, or that's where we have to go, is underneath the anger, because underneath anger is the more vulnerable emotions of hurt or fear. And that's where we're going to find out about what is wrong and what we need in the situation. And in seeking to find out what we need in that situation, it moves us out of the overwhelm of that moment of a dysregulated limbic system into the frontal lobes. It actually moves you into the thinking mind, and you make a plan. And when you've got a plan, everything settles down. Isn't that right? When you've got is that right or not? When you've got a plan, things settle down. Okay, so we have a plan. Things will settle down. Empowerment. That's what happens when we have a plan. Because anger, when something's wrong, we have this incredible moment of disempowerment, and we forget that we are adults and we can make a plan. We can take wise action. So let's hear some of the, just the same, turn on your microphone. What are some of the sensations that alert you that anger is present? Body sensations of anger.
Heat.
Sorry?
Heat.
Heat. Okay, yes, heat. Yes, what else?
Tension in the hands and the jaw.
Tension in hands and jaw, yep.
A big knot in the stomach.
Big knot in the stomach, yep.
Constriction across the chest and in the legs.
Uh-huh.
Your voice might get louder without
Yes.
intentionally.
Yep. We get bigger. When we're angry, we get bigger like this. Ooh. I'm going to get you. Okay, the voice goes up. Yep. What else?
Darting, bulging eyes.
Bulging eyes. That's right. So that's also good to notice, because when the eyes are bulging like that, we actually can't see. You know, when it's called blind anger, isn't it? We go blind and at the moment, we go blind at the very moment at which we need to be seeing clearly. So we can't see either inner or outer when our eyes are bulging like that. So it's a good thing to notice when your eyes start bulging, because when you soften them, you can see both inner and outer. And that's what we need to do to identify what our needs are in that situation. Okay, that gives us an idea. There's lots of leaning forward, also goes often with a raised voice. I used to work with some outdoor workers for the one of the city councils, and we were talking about this, and they said, oh yeah, they call it the rooster stance when they're angry, and they go right up and they're leaning forward, and that's when you know some maybe fisticuffs are going to happen. The rooster stance. So it's good to have names for these things, so we can start turning towards what's happening in our body when we've got good names for them like that. It takes away the sort of wrong and badness that we've put on that that emotion particular. All right, so anger is my experience of separating from a hurt that I think won't go away. So how we separate from that hurt is by turning our attention outwards onto the so-called object of our anger, the bad person or the bad event, and that separates us from the vulnerable feeling that's underneath the anger, which we hate, because generally we hate vulnerability. So it forces us, that sense of unpleasant around the hurt, the conditioned nature of pleasant and unpleasant, forces our attention outwards, and that is not the helpful direction, because what then happens is that our imagination, perceptions, and so on, and memory are ramping up the emotion of anger. So we just keep feeding. If we look outwards, we keep feeding that anger, and then we're likely to dump it. We're likely to do an attack and be defensive and do unskillful actions. But if we turn towards the hurt or the vulnerability that's underlying the anger, then we can see what is the need there. And sometimes it's a personal need, and sometimes it's going to be a social need. You know, we heard a social need yesterday, angry about people don't care enough. And a lot of us have that sense of people don't care enough, and there's anger around that. But we're not going to be able to do something skillful if we stay in that anger. Or, you know, the situation with putting the dam in this incredible rainforest gully, when a dam is such outmoded technology. You can feel anger about that, but you're not thinking well and creatively if you're not connected with the hurt of the loss of incredible rainforest environment, indigenous heritage sites and sacred sites and so on. Then you're going to do much more powerful action, much more empowered, much more creative action through that hurt. So sometimes we're very not used to identifying what our needs are. So this is also a huge other piece connected with emotions. because we have also been conditioned into thinking that our needs are not important. And needs is sadly another one of those very overused words that we could also have quite a big aversion to. My needs, you know, so everybody's needs. So, but it's just one of those buzzwords. So we just have to just let that go or call it something else. Because yeah, it's been associated a bit with well, anyway, lots of associations have put us off that word. So what we want to do is to identify what we need in the situation. That can take quite some time, and it means sitting with the hurt or with the fear. And that's uncomfortable. So you can do it in little bits and pieces. You know, I had a situation quite some time ago where I needed to get to the bottom of something I'd got angry about. And I would have sat with that hurt for about 3 weeks, I think, on and off with a cup of tea. And actually it turned out not to be a personal, well, I mean, it was a need, but not so much a personal individual need. It turned out to be a need for the whole group, that I was in a group where certain voices were being not allowed to speak. And at first it looked like that I wasn't allowed to speak. So it's a very complicated process that you're going through when you're exploring what the need is. So I realized it wasn't, oh, I had been shut up in this group because I'm perfectly capable of being heard. It was because other people were being shut up in the group. So then I had a plan and I did something about that plan. And sometimes when you have a plan, you can't enact that plan maybe for months because that group isn't going to get back together. But once you've got a plan, you don't have to go over and over and over the thing. And I've had many plans in my life to take empowered action that sometimes have taken a very long time to enact. But once you have the plan, you don't have to dwell on it anymore. So that exploration of needs, and sometimes it's helpful to have someone to help you through that. What do I need here? And then the next part of that is validating the need. Now, this is hard because many of us have been brought up in a situation where our needs as young children haven't been important. And we're not blaming anybody, but this has been the cause and conditions of our upbringing, and we have learned to dismiss our needs. We've learned to dismiss them. So we might come up with a need, but we don't carry it out because we reactively dismiss it out of habit. So we've got to be careful of that dismissal. Or we go into a whole thing about, oh, people are way more worse off than me, and I don't deserve to ask for this or have this. And especially social activists in the area of social justice, that is a very conditioned response. I'm not going to have any of my needs until everyone's things are, there's a much better level of social justice here. But that's just burnout territory. That's going to burn you out. We need to take care of ourselves. So we've also got to be careful. So we validate the need and then we ask for the need. So we've got to be careful that the need is not put in, I need you to. because we're back into manipulation now. You do this and I don't have to feel these feelings. So that's quite a difficult thing. And there's often the need is something that we have to give ourselves. It's not something that we can get from others. That's a whole other area. We can't cover that here, but we don't want to get back into, you've got to be like this so I can be okay. It's fine to say, I would like some support with da 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 da, and the person says yes or no. I can give you that support. Something along those lines. But it's not, I need you to, because we're back in that type of thinking. The thinking that I need you to comes out of is dependent thinking. I'm making myself dependent upon something I can't control. And that bores right down into the heart of the Dharma. We are learning not to make our happiness dependent on everything, because it's all out of our control. That's what we are learning. The Dharma is a massive maturing and growing up process. This is one little piece of it. In our interactions, in our work with emotions, we are not making ourselves dependent upon something that is out of our control. That is crazy making. Crazy making. And that is what is going to fuel those imaginations and perceptions around an unpleasant feeling. Will turn it into massive emotions. So this is a massively big area, as you can see, and it's massively complex, this area of emotions, but it is so interesting. It's such an interesting area of investigation of our internal world, of our internal process, and the movement of mind. So when we talk about the movement of mind, that is, we're talking about the mind, body, the movement of sensations, the movement of thoughts, the movement of the back and forth of pleasant and unpleasant, the movement of mind states, the coming and going of mind states. That's what we're talking about in the movement of mind. And if we can get some spaciousness around the movement of mind, then we can open to the vastness of who we really are. And the all-encompassing nature, an all-encompassing nature. All-encompassing spaciousness of the nature of who we are, really. We are not all these comings and goings, that's for sure. They are just like bubbles on the river Ganges, the Ganga, the Buddha talked about. So I think that's all I have to say on that today. Let's, I think, maybe just spend the last few minutes settling into our bodies, because your minds are probably racing around with all this information, I can imagine. So let's just settle into our bodies. And if the mind is racing around, just notice what the body is doing with that racing around. Are there tinglings, pulsings, tightenings, contraction, pulling, pushing, heat, cold? What's happening in the body? And just give yourself time for transition from outer. Have your attention on the outer, on this information, my voice. Just turning inwards, just adjusting, transitioning to that. Having patience. There might be excitement, the tingling of excitement. There might be sensations of fear. Will I ever understand this? You might have been triggered by the memory of an emotion. Many things could have happened in this hour. Just feeling your body. The bare sensations without the elaboration, without the story. Returning to the body if the mind drifts off. Sometimes that drifting off is an escape from the intensity of the body. Just going back there. Or if it feels too much, just touching in and touching out. Going back to the breath, the anchor. Then going to the sensation, feeling empowered about the choice.